The Mega Drive was my very first console. I shared one with my brother. I say shared, it was his console to be fair, but I felt like we shared it, even though he would argue it was all his. But I'm going to outline a few of the games today that defined my life and where I am today with regards to gaming. But not only that, some of the experiences I've had with Mega Drive games have actually defined me as a person. And I'll get into that as we go through the list. Up first is going to be the most obvious choice when you talk about a Sega Mega Drive, Sonic. This was the very first video game I got given as a present. I really can't remember why it was given to me and not my brother, as he was the one who technically owned the Mega Drive, and how he didn't own it already is beyond me. The postman delivered a parcel. It dropped on the mat. My mother picked it up and opened it to check what it was. She didn't know I was there. She turned around and I caught a glimpse of the cover, and I will always remember that. It's actually one of my very earliest memories in general, not just of video games. So for that reason, it will always hold a very special place in my heart. But besides that, of course, you can play it on a toaster these days. You will never get rid of Sonic. Next, I am going to talk about FIFA because, to be fair, that is a very large part of who I am and what games I play today. I was very sports orientated when I was a child, and to be fair, I still am. I love football with a passion, unlucky Spurs. But with that being said, I do owe a lot of that to FIFA. FIFA 96 in particular, I will always consider that to be my most favourite FIFA of all time, and I am including some of the more recent releases as well. But just FIFA in general is up there with some of the most enjoyable memories that I have playing video games. If you ever owned a Mega Drive as a child, or maybe later on in life, there is a very strong chance that you have played Golden Axe, and that is the third game on the list. Now, I could have included a few more, such as Altered Beast here, which is kind of on par with Golden Axe, but I just feel like I put a lot more effort into Golden Axe than I did any other game in and around that time. I'm sure many of you have played this next game, but for me, this has more meaning than just the enjoyment of the video game, and that is Cannon Fodder. Now, I don't currently own this game. I'm still waiting to try and find it in good condition and boxed with a manual. You'd think it would be easier than most because it's only around £15 to £20, but for the life of me, I can't find it in a CEX. With that being said, the reason Cannon Fodder is on the list, and I would put it quite high up on my list of favourite Mega Drive games of all time, and it's not just because of how much enjoyment I got out of the gameplay, it's kind of the message behind it as well. Now, a lot of people won't take this message from it, and I was quite young at the time, but it's always stuck with me even to this day. So Cannon Fodder is kind of a humorous, light-hearted look at war. So it's not an RTS, it is a shooter, but you can control your troops in groups, or you can control them individually, and you're in a fictional war, and you take in a certain number of troops at a time, and you've got to try and either free hostages, or you go and like liberate installations and things like that. It's a very basic game at its core, but at the same time, that kind of introduced me into like the top-down, almost RTS style of video game. But the reason why it stuck with me is because once you die in this video game, you are dead. It is a permadeath situation. But of course, you can go and recruit more soldiers and have another go, but once the ones you had originally die, they are gone forever. And they are represented then in-game by a little white cross on a hill. That stuck with me and always has done ever since I was a child. For many reasons, of course, because it does show what war is. Once you're dead, there's no reset button. But of course, on the Mega Drive and any video game, you can just reset and start again. But the permadeath was the first time I'd ever experienced it. And to be fair, there aren't actually that many games when you think about it that do have a permadeath system. The other thing it kind of taught me was to never really give up. I know it's deep because essentially it's just a video game. But for some reason, and I don't know why, that's the takeaway I had when I was a kid. I'm not going to give up now. And I very rarely give up on anything. Even if I'm last place in a video game, racer for example, I will finish the race, because what is the point in starting again? What is the point in hitting reset? And you're only cheating yourself. You might as well finish it. What happens, happens. And it's the same when it comes to things like running. I'm out running, I'm feeling like I'm going to die, I just need to stop. But no, you keep going to the point where you wanted to finish. And I always come back to Cannon Fodder. And maybe I'm reading too much into it. The 8-year-old me, or however old I was when I played it, has just taken this way too far, but it is something that I always think about. When I'm about to give up, I think of Cannon Fodder, I think of those little white crosses, and I go again. Let's go to another sports game because I don't think there are that many on the list. I could easily have filled this with sports games, but Evander Holyfield Boxing was, I wouldn't say the first taste of boxing I had, because my granddad loved boxing and he had loads of boxing videos and we used to sit down and watch them every now and again. But when Evander Holyfield Boxing came around, I really, really liked that game, to the point where I would just play it over and over and over again. And of course, as a kid, you don't like to lose, so I did actually like playing some of the easier people with the likes of Evander Holyfield. And of course, he used to put the cheat in to get, was it the Hulk or Rocky Balboa? I always forget, but he turned green. Obviously, it must have been the Hulk, but I don't know whether you typed in Rocky Balboa to get the cheat or whether you typed in the Hulk. I can't remember. Again, I don't own it because I'm still trying to find it and I can't find it anyway. But that game, oh, monumental. Next is a classic and represented by the remake behind me. It is, of course, Streets of Rage. The soundtrack to this, literally, and I mean literally, people say literally all the time and they don't really mean it, it's just a word to add in. I literally am brought to tears nearly every single time I sit down and just listen to the soundtrack. Most of the time I will use that soundtrack in the background of my videos, and I have to stop myself from just sitting there and listening to it. I could easily just sit there and I just relive all the memories of playing this game. Now, I never actually owned the game like standalone. I had it as part of like the Mega Game 6. I think it came with like columns and was it Super Hang-On, World Cup Italia 90, which are also great games. And incidentally, that is another way I had Golden Axe, because when my brother moved out, he took the standalone Golden Axe with him, but I still had Mega Game 6, so I still had Golden Axe. But Streets of Rage will always be remembered by me for that soundtrack, and I'm sure by many, but the gameplay wasn't half bad either. I've mentioned this game a lot in my video game series where I build a video game collection, and that is of course Theme Park. Now, I have tried to put these in some sort of order maybe as I've gone, and I'm trying to remember like when and how they came in to my life and at what stage, but they're all a bit skewed, and Theme Park has been something that I can just always remember being there. I've had this on like 27 different platforms at this point. It's just one of those games I could sit down and play it for hours from start to wherever I finish, and then when I go again, I can just start over again and the game doesn't get boring. And I kind of feel like that with a lot of games. City Skylines in more recent years is one of those games I could do that with. I just love that type of thing, but Theme Park is just, it's top notch. What a game. I can't remember the story behind this one necessarily, but Home Alone. This game, of course, is adapted from the movies, where you are Kevin McAllister and you have to try and stop the wet bandits from robbing your house. However, in the video game, you are Kevin McAllister, but you have to try and stop them from robbing everyone's houses. And how you do that is by setting traps. And that is the game. From start to finish, you are going from house to house on a sledge. You have to get to the house before the wet bandits do, set up all the traps, and then try and slow them down enough so that they reach a certain pain threshold and then they leave. If they catch you, they pop you on a hook on the wall and you have to wriggle free to be able to get down. And there are other things in the game, such as I think spiders and things like that as well, if memory serves. Again, a game I don't currently own in my collection, but one that is definitely on my list. As many of you may know, and probably most of you don't, I love running, and I used to be a sprinter. I used to compete in championships and Welsh athletic competitions and things. That also crossed over into video games, to the point where I love Olympic style video games, and Olympic Gold on the Mega Drive was my very first taste of that. And to be fair, you could argue that that got me into athletics in the first place. I used to sit there for hours button mashing to try and beat a certain time, and of course with my brothers we used to play it a lot as well, and it was always the same events. I mean, to be fair, we did play all through the events. We used to do full Olympic games with diving, even though none of us really understood what was going on. But the 100-meter events in Olympic Gold, they will always, I mean, they are burned into the front of my brain. I used to play it that much. Absolutely love that game. We're going to move into a little bit of story time with the next few games, because Street Fighter 2 is a game that I never owned and never played as a kid, but it's on the list. And that is the unique thing about this video, really, because it's not just the experience of the gameplay or the graphics or even my environment when I was playing or who I was playing it with. Sometimes something like this pops up. Now, Street Fighter 2 was a game that I really wanted as a kid. Used to see adverts on TV, my friends used to have it, and of course I did play it a little bit around people's houses and stuff, but I never owned it myself. I don't think I even got to rent it, but there was one time, and I will never forget this, and I never ever let my mother forget it either. We were in town and we were in the indoor market in my town, and there was a guy who had a video game stall. And I may have told this story before, but in brief, he had obviously a table full of Mega Drive games because that was the time. He had some SNES games there as well, of course, but Street Fighter 2 stood out to me, and I'll never forget it. It was £20. I think he had it like $19.99 or something, and I desperately wanted it. I begged her. I begged and begged and begged, please can I get that game? Eventually, she said yes, but on the way back, because I need to go to Marks and Spencer's first. Now, bear in mind, I can remember this as if it was yesterday, and I must have been about 7. We went to Marks and Spencer's. It felt like we were there for about 3 days. Stood around, I was like, oh my god, come on, come on, come on, come on. And eventually we went back to the market. Now, to this day, I'm still convinced that she gave the guy who owned the store like a little nudge or a wink or something and said, please, can you hide this because I don't want to buy it. When we went back, it had gone. Oh, I've sold it. Now, whether when I wasn't looking, like I said, she said just hide it or, you know, like that or something, she might have done. And I don't know, and she won't tell me to this day. Her excuse was, I probably couldn't afford it, but I didn't know how to tell you no, which doesn't sound like my mother, if I'm honest. She would normally have just told me no. So I don't really know what happened there. Maybe he did sell it, but I was devastated. Why is that even a thing? I remember it as if it was yesterday, and I'm 35. That happened when I was about 7. I am still upset about that. Like, it's not my mother's fault, obviously. I mean, it might be, but I wasn't a spoilt child or anything, but she said I could have it, and to me, your word is your bond, so why have I not got that game? Now, I do have it now, and I've since bought it again, and I did send her a picture of it, and I said, look, I finally got it, and she didn't really care, but she sounds like a terrible mother. She isn't, but still, that will always stay with me forever and ever. I don't know what message it gives, and I don't really know the moral of the story, but that game defined me a little bit as a kid. I don't know, toughened me up, hardened me a little bit. I don't really know what it did, but it did something. Sticking with story time, Beavis and Butthead. Now, this was back when video games were just toys to parents, and they didn't really look at things like age ratings or the content of the game. It was only really around the Grand Theft Auto era, I believe, where parents actually started to take note of what was in video games and whether their child could play it or not. So Beavis and Butthead, as like, I don't know, an 8-year-old, a 9-year-old maybe at the time. I'd only really seen a handful of the show, like little bits here or there, but I knew I liked it. I knew I found it funny. And I went to Blockbuster one Friday. My parents had just split up. I don't normally share things like this, but it is relevant to the story. My parents had split up maybe, I don't know, 6 months prior to this. And I was about to go over my mother's house where I didn't live, and they'd moved into a new house and they were going to decorate it. And I was meant to stay there for the weekend. So I got to go to Blockbuster, and I got to choose a game to play for the weekend, and I picked Beavis and Butthead. I knew very little about it, I just knew that I found them funny. I sat in a room with no carpet, no paint on the walls, and just a very small like camping table in the corner, some sort of box to sit on, and I played that game solid for 48 hours. Absolutely loved the death of it. I don't own it today, unfortunately. It is, I wouldn't say it's pricey, but it's 45 quid, which for a Mega Drive game, I suppose, is on the pricier side. I will eventually get it because it is one of those games that I'll always remember for that reason. And again, it's like the story is attached to it, and that's why some of these games are so predominant in my mind. It's not necessarily because of how good the game was or anything like that. It's just the environment or the story that is attached to it. Moving into another sports game, it is Sensible Soccer. I have got this game again recently, and I've played it a lot recently as well. I say recently, I mean I've stopped playing it the last maybe month or so, but when I first got it, it was a month solid of just sat here where I am right now playing it on the Mega Drive that is behind you. Absolutely adore that game. I used to spend hours just editing players' names. That is fun in itself for me. I know it sounds really stupid, but if you've ever played FIFA Ultimate Team, you know that most of the fun that you have on that game is just on the menus. Sensible Soccer is exactly the same, but without the microtransactions. Next up is Turtles, but this is a VHS. What are you talking about? Well, this is how I found out about this game. So maybe not Turtles 3, I think it was Turtles 1, but still, I was sat there watching the VHS of Turtles, and before the film used to show on a VHS or the TV show, they used to have trailers, believe it or not. And one of the trailers was The Simpsons. Well, I used to watch that trailer through because I found it funny, love The Simpsons, who doesn't? And then after the Simpsons trailer, there would be a Turtles like arcade game trailer. To this day, I don't know whether it was actually Hyperstone Heist or whether it was just the arcade game. Can't remember. Maybe I need to pop this in and have a little watch. However, they used to play a Turtles game trailer before the main feature, and I loved the look of it, really wanted it. And one day I just said, I think it was like a special occasion, my birthday or something, I really want that game, and I got it. Now it's 90 quid. I think I traded it in to my local video game store when I upgraded my console, but still, absolutely love that game, and it all stemmed from a VHS movie trailer. Mortal Kombat, whether it's 1, 2 or 3, doesn't make a blind bit of difference. I was there, I wouldn't say day one because I didn't know when things were released. The internet didn't exist, but Mortal Kombat is by far my favourite fighting series of games. I mean, things like Tekken and what have you, Street Fighter for example, they're good, I really do enjoy them. However, Mortal Kombat will always be my favourite, my top-notch favourite beat-em-up. To this day, I still only own the first one. I think the third one's quite cheap. I think the second one is the one that has a little bit more value, but I think, again, that's only like 20 quid. So I do need to get them, it's just a case of finding them. Road Rash 3 is our penultimate game on this list for very good reason. This is definitely in my top 3 favourite Mega Drive games of all time. Now, I didn't play the first one, and I still haven't. I really did enjoy the second, but the third one, when that came out, and I think that's the most expensive one now, that was the definitive game for me. I don't know how I got it. I never had the box or the manual, I just had the cartridge. And to be fair, I think I had that up until like the last 5 years or so, and then I sold it off before the pandemic started. Kind of wish I hadn't now, because it's probably doubled in value. But with that being said, that was the first game that I can remember anyway, where you had to race to get money, to upgrade your bike, to improve your bike, and of course, you can beat the ever-loving crap off the people driving past you. The other thing I liked to do was what YouTubers do now to make money. I used to do little challenges with myself. Is it possible to crash your bike at the very first chance you get and then run to the finish line? I don't recommend doing it. It's very tedious and it takes a long time, but I can confirm it is possible. But that game is a masterpiece from start to finish. Again, I don't think I ever finished it. I got quite far at one point, but I don't know what it was with Mega Drive games. I didn't finish that many of them, to be fair. I just kept replaying the same levels over and over again, and I was perfectly fine with that, and Road Rash is absolutely no exception. And then we have almost like a full circle moment in my life, really, when it comes to the Mega Drive, and this is probably my final memory from this console. It's Outrun. Now again, these days, that is quite an expensive game. It is considered to be one of the best on the platform, and for good reason. It is a very, very good game, but for me, it has another meaning. Talked about Beavis and Butthead and how that game kind of helped me through that transition period of my parents splitting up. Well, this game kind of repaired a little bit of the relationship that me and my mother had at the time. My mother never liked video games, never played them, never showed an interest in them, just didn't really care. In passing, may have made a little comment about, oh, well done, or something like that, just to sort of, you know, boost my morale, if you will. But when it came to Outrun, she showed an actual interest and wanted to play it. And I actually remember sitting down for quite large periods of time playing that game with my mother, and I'd never known that to happen before or since. The soundtrack got her interested in the first place because she really liked the music as she was like walking past one day, and then she was a little bit more interested and wanted to have a little bit of a go, and she enjoyed it, and then we would just sit there for hours. And it wasn't just on that one occasion, it would be almost a regular thing. If I'd go over there on the weekend, she'd be like, oh, should we play some Outrun? Yeah, okay. Like, it was just one of those really bizarre, strange moments. It hasn't been repeated since, and obviously it probably never will, but that is a core memory. It'll always remain with me. And like I said, it's almost like a full circle moment, to be fair. Love Outrun. Again, don't own it in the collection, and funnily enough, it is now like 40 something quid, but it's definitely something that is on the list and I need to get. There are plenty of other video games on the Mega Drive that I could have mentioned in this video that had a significant say in one point in my life. Maybe I was a little bit depressed at the time, maybe I just was sad in general and it cheered me up. Maybe I was already happy and it just sort of rounded off a brilliant day or a summer holiday or something. But the ones on the list that I've mentioned, those are the ones that leave me with core memories, and a lot of them have more than just the satisfaction of playing that video game. Yes, it was a good game, but there's just a little bit more behind it for me personally. Drop a game in the comments that you played as a child that you would say has defined you as a person. If you want to check out another video from me, you can click here, and until the next time, goodbye.